All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our INSEAD TED Talk today. Today's webinar is part of the TED Talk X series by Digital at INSEAD. Before we dive into our topic today, let me do some housekeeping. So the whole audience is muted and the video and chat functions are disabled. But we have the Q&A tab, which is opened, and so you can actually suggest questions for the speakers. Please keep your questions short and to the point. And to help us identify the most relevant questions, you can vote on the existing questions with the buttons. Let's not forget that this webinar is being recorded, and if you have any technical issues, please email digital@insead.edu. They will be responding to your answers. All right, so Accenture has been a long-lasting partner with us and a supporter of Digital at INSEAD over the past decade. They've been playing a key role in our conversations around AI, technology, and business transformation. Equally, DBS is a fantastic partner to INSEAD, especially in their support for last year's Business Innovation Challenge that we hosted on INSEAD's Singapore campus. I've actually had a few visits at DBS with executive education groups, so thank you so much. So let's join today's conversation on banking with AI and prompt engineering. We're delighted to have Royce Teo, the group head of regional marketing technology and cognitive banking at DBS, and Gianluca Malagoli, the lead for data and AI and financial services at Accenture, joined today's conversation on transforming banking with AI and prompt engineering. Before we start, I would love for Royce and Gianluca to briefly introduce themselves and share what excites them the most about AI today. Royce, Gianluca?
Hey, hi guys. Maybe I have a go at this first. I'm Royce Teo, a long-time DBS staffer, currently the group head for Martech. So Gen AI is also within my remit. So we do all the vertical use cases where AI, Gen AI in particular, is applied to extract value, right? Not just value to the bank, but also value to our clients, to our customers. So that's broadly my remit.
And what excites you the most? Before we go to you, Gianluca, Royce, what excites you the most about AI today?
AI, particularly Gen AI, allows us to bring tremendous amount of value to our clients and new ways of doing things, helping the clients to solve problems in every area, right? Of course, within the context of banking. So it's very wide ranging. So the possibilities of the kind of services that we can and bespokeness that we can bring to the clients are really what keeps me and the whole team going.
Thank you. Gianluca.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Gianluca Malagoli from Accenture. I've been in Accenture for a number of years, which I prefer not to declare, but it's quite a few. And I am leading data and AI in the strategic consulting part of Accenture, and in particular, been running my career through banking for many years. So that's where I much rather prefer apply AI and Gen AI in terms of industry, although I have also cross-industry experience because I actually, got a view of many other sectors. So AI, it's incredible. I think it is an incredible technology, and as Royce just mentioned, it's really sky's the limit in terms of where we can apply it. I think there are many things that has been done, but we are really at the beginning of it, and that's really what excites me, because I think that both from a technology evolution, because it's so much rapidly evolving, and from a business value that we can bring, I think it's really very exciting and the place to be at the moment. So happy to be here and to share some thoughts with you and some experience with you today.
Thank you to both. Indeed, what we're going to try to do is focus on where AI is creating real value in banking today, beyond just the hype, right? And so that's a little bit how we're going to leverage your experience, Royce, and your experience, Gianluca, to kind of get to these stories around around your experience and sharing a little bit what you've seen into where's the hype, where's the value, right? And really focusing on some of these business cases, use cases that you were mentioning, Gianluca. Gianluca, maybe to start with you, how would you define prompt banking, and why is it becoming increasingly significant in the banking sector?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, prompt banking is really an approach that a concept, let's put it that way, that as Accenture we have, because and it aims at actually putting AI and Gen AI at the center stage of the bank transformation, making AI and Gen AI pervasive in all areas, or in all critical areas, and in all value areas of the bank. Why these? Well, because we've done many research around AI and the potential of AI and Gen AI, and we find out that up to 67% of hours which are being worked in a bank, in a typical bank, could be impacted in some way, both in terms of automation or augmentation of the capabilities of the people, and of course, this makes an incredible pool of productivity that can be used in order to really change the value and the financials of a bank. We estimate that the productivity pool, if we apply AI and Gen AI at scale, could reach up to 20 to 30%. In terms of hours that are freed from typical tasks that today we are doing, which could potentially means or could potentially translate into up to a 3% of cost income value generated, and up to 2% of ROE increase once we reach the scale. There are many areas where we can apply, of course, AI and Gen AI, both in terms of service models, so how I serve my clients and how I engage my clients, of course, in the operation area, in the credits area, in the compliance area, in the IT area, really kind of limitless, with different level of maturity, of course, at the moment, but really the areas are really, really many, and we believe there's a lot of value that can be ripped off from AI and Gen AI.
If we actually focus, so that's a more general answer about Gen AI and AI in the banking sector. If we focus a little bit more on prompt banking, which is again, the systemic collection and management of effective prompts, where do you see some of the areas in which the banking sector can really start applying these types of aspects? You've mentioned some of them in a more general aspect, but if I actually look at the aspect of the interaction with prompts, how could we actually find?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, certainly in enhancing customer experience, that's one of the area. In particular, we see adoption of AI and Gen AI and agents, I would call it that way, both on the internal part of the bank and also on the direct channels, for example, in the form of enhanced chatbots, for example, for improving the user experience and for improving typical processes such as, for example, consultation of products or sales of products. Which we are typically used to do it in a very process-oriented way, but that can actually be done in a conversational way, because at the end of the day, I'm actually using prompt to interact with my bank. So the interaction could be really one of the key elements that could change the relationship, because digital channel typically tend to create a efficient but colder relation with the customers, whilst instead Gen AI in particular have got the power to make it much more similar to an interaction which is like with a human Okay, so it's much more easy to interact with my customers. So we believe that as per the mobile has become mainstream, ChatGPT has been a bit, the breaker in terms of how we use prompts, and these type of interaction will be more and more important and more valued by the customer in the bank. So certainly in enhancing customer experience, which at the same time, enhancing customer experience easily bring to a higher cross-selling and upselling opportunity toward the clients. Because of course, while I interact with the agents, or while I talk to an operator in the branch, which is augmented, let's say, by GenAI, I can create a new upselling and cross-selling opportunity based on previous conversation, based on previous interaction, based on previous emails, or anything that has happened before. And so getting a much more effective, let's say, script for pitching new products, or a much more enhanced interaction on the channel, which doesn't mean I have to go and find the product in my mobile application, but actually I have a prompt that suggests something for me. Okay, so certainly that's another area of value that can be extracted. Then there are areas where efficiency and automation can actually be much more relevant. For example, in the operation of the bank, in the back offices, where, for example, I can apply AI and GenAI also to very typical tasks, which is like ticket management, email management, the document consistency check in the credit value chain, for example. So there are many areas where AI and GenAI can be used also for the efficiency play, and not just for revenue growth or creating a new way of interacting. Another area, and then I'll wrap up, where we see value is also in diminishing the risk for the banks, both in terms of, for example, credit merit. So how efficient I can use AI for actually scoring the credit merit of my customers, but also in the areas of fraud prevention and security, because of course we can use AI and GenAI, in this case in particular AI, for being much more efficient in identifying patterns that can threaten the security of the transaction. I can use AI for not just identifying potential fraud through rule-based mechanism, but through something that evolves and understands in a much more flexible way how something is happening. So that's really the great value of AI and GenAI in particular. And if I go in a more technical aspect to the agentic architecture, so the agentic concept of AI, where I have agents that with the memory of what is happening is able to actually spot a new pattern, which are not hard-coded anywhere, but can actually create a threat. So there are many areas, as you can see, where we can extract value from customer to operation to diminishing risk. All of that really can impact the bottom line and the top line of the bank.
And even, I guess, also on compliance issues and obligation traceability.
Absolutely, compliance, absolutely, is definitely one of the area, absolutely.
Super. So Royce, Gianluca kind of spoke about two things, enhancing customer experience and streamlining banking operations. Can you share a little bit what you guys have been doing at DBS around AI and prompt engineering?
So let me take this in a few parts, right? The summary for AI usage is that we have been on this journey for the past at least 8 years, right? And even earlier, if you count some of the rule-based models, and in all they are all machine learning, right? In all they are AI by definition, and we've pervasively used it to the core in everything: HR, fraud prevention, KYC, credit, risk management. all the way to making business decisions, client targeting, and all that. So we've been using that for the longest time, and it's used pervasively in virtually all departments. Now, the nascent area that we're going into right now is generative AI, and of course, then also the agentic AI, which is in a sense the autonomous generative AI. Those areas are, like I said, more nascent. And therefore, for most organizations, we are still at the experimental stage, right? In the sense that the accuracy, the effectiveness of the outputs have to be validated. And our way to approach it now is to put a human in the loop. It's all co-pilot, mostly all co-pilot, right? And the areas that we see huge potential would be like in wealth management, in the advisory space, would be in call centers, would be in telesales, would be in even collections, right? In sales and marketing, right? In generating marketing content, for instance. And because the power of generative AI is that, as in its own namesake, right? You are generating something more effectively, and therefore helping the human being, say an advisor, to do what he really is tasked to do, and which is to help the client, rather than going through the administrative work, which in our bank and in many other banks are taking a huge part of a advisor's life, a relationship manager's life. So these are the couple of areas that we are looking at, right? And it's always human in the loop for two reasons. You have to validate and check on the outputs of the machine. That's number one. And number two is the machine will not be able to be exactly on par or exceed yet at this point in time what the human being, when he puts his mind to it, right, can do. The third part would be then how do you give a reinforce? How do you do reinforcement learning, human feedback, right? RLH, HF. So that's tremendously important, because as an advisor, as I use a machine, I teach it, I give feedback, right? I give feedback to the prompt engineers. I give feedback on the outputs. I give feedback on something that's tested in my mind, but it's not captured anywhere in terms of structured data. So we feed a lot of that back, right? You give feedback from, say, a call center officer. A customer would call in and, make a complaint or give a compliment or ask you to help solve a problem. You will be able to feedback on whether this summarization or the recommended actions work. So that's how we work in the bank, and the areas where we see the highest potential: customer service, wealth advisory, sales and marketing, even some risk management functions like collections, right? And the distinction here is that previously it's pretty much AI pretty much deals with the structured data realm of input. But now with the large language capabilities, you are able to use the machine to ingest and digest and synthesize a vast amount of information that were previously, if you will use the word, encoded in language, in write-ups, right? I can have my chief investment officer publishing a 100-page report, right? And as a RM, relationship manager, I would spend 2 hours reading it. But all that I need was to synthesize that 2 minutes conversation and pitch to my client. Now, if I'm able to use the machine to read and synthesize and derive the signals, then that time could be better spent understanding the needs of my client and bringing value to him or her. The thing with the time saved is really rechanneled into doing the right set of activities, bringing value to the client. That's what we see.
I'd like to kind of expand on that one. I know of a case at Scotiabank where they actually used, indeed, in their call centers, they used the AI to kind of bring the next agent as you escalate on board on the conversation. And the way they communicate this is 1 million hours saved for our customers, right? So it's a customer value proposition, which I really like. The other aspect on the human in the loop, there's a really interesting case from Walmart. Walmart, 80% of their SKUs come from 20% of the suppliers, which means that the rest of the long tail is poorly treated by the humans on the purchasing part. And so they would rather actually interact with an AI, which is an agent, which is actually relatively fair, right? So these are kind of interesting kind of examples that you give indeed. Um, so you mentioned call centers, telesales, marketing. Can you share, Royce, maybe where you've seen some successes and also where you've seen some challenges? You mentioned the data aspect and to be able to digest and process language, but you have to have access to the data, and we'll talk about it from a regulatory point of view. But also, what are good ways of enabling employees with effective tools and training? How have you done a little bit with this within DBS, and are there any learnings of things that worked and things that were a bit more difficult?
So now the thing is this, right? Very often from the outside, when you look at how you develop a GenAI solution for a staff, and even our own staff members may oversimplify in their mind. It's like, okay, give me a conversational interface, and I can ask it anything under the sun. Unfortunately, that won't work, right? So to instrument and to orchestrate a use case in a very specialized field, say in the area of wealth management, where you have to give very complex, involved, and intimate advice to clients. It's not that straightforward to be able to orchestrate a use case, right? It won't just happen because you have dumped a lot of transactional data or even unstructured data and expect that magic could happen, right? So those are the difficulties that we expected. It's not a difficulty or challenge that we didn't expect. So we were very well prepared for that, right? But I do want to caution my contemporaries and whoever I'm privileged to share this with today on the webinar that the structuring of a use case, the staging of the data sets in a way that is consumable by the machine is no trivial task, right? So I have, say, 100,000 articles. I have hundreds of thousands of news that keeps streaming in real time. We deal with hundreds of markets across several asset classes. How do you process all that? It won't work just because you're streaming it into a data lake and you think that GenAI is able to extract all those things, right? So it has to be a very judicious way that you set up even the interface for the staff members, right? For the advisors, for the telesales guys, for or even our call center officers. You can be very orchestrated and carefully planned through so that the right things are retrieved by the machines for its own consumption. By machine, obviously, I meant the set of prompts, right? For it to be able to consume and then give the right output to the users. It's very, very tricky, right? And if you can crack that, then, well, then sky's the limit. But if you cannot crack that, you don't enable, for instance, a proper retrieval, right? There's no retrieval architecture generation involved, right? You don't index it properly. You don't have a very tight corpus of information to do your inferencing, which is a layman talk. Is just the using a machine to give an output to do the inferencing. I'm not even talking about the training part, just the inferencing. Very often you're going to get outcomes that are off the mark, And that's very dangerous, which is why we always have, which is why we definitely have at this point, the majority of the industry and the technology to have a human in the loop. Right? You must have somebody who is there to adjudicate for himself what he sees as part of the output, and then train the set of prompts again. So that's one part that I would like to caution all the listeners and peers who are trying to dabble in this area, right? Being mastery of language doesn't mean that your output will be properly curated for the users. That's the first thing. Now, if you want to do really horizontal stuff, basic things like policy, explain that policy to me, explain that product term sheet to me, general inch deep kind of thing, then yeah, that's simple. That's simple, but that's also where you can't really extract the most value, right? You make your life easier. It's like, you got a search engine with interactive, but that's necessary, but you may not extract as much value versus a very well planned use case.
I really like what you're saying because there is an infrastructure and an interface type of aspect. So sorry, a technology aspect, right? To making AI and Gen AI and data available. But there's also another aspect, and I think this is the interesting part, which is the other aspect is changing the mindset a little bit of the bankers, which is, hang on, it's just not you're gonna find a solution on page 57. You have to develop a little bit of an engineering mindset, right? An engineering mindset. And so, how do you find it? What did you guys kind of see around developing that cultural transformation? What are some examples, maybe specific examples, if you can share? And Gianluca, I'll ask you the question also afterwards. But specific examples where you saw, hey, you know what? We tried to transform that culture of a very solid culture in our bank to a very new digital culture. This aspect of engineering, use case centric, to leverage the wonderful tools that your engineering department has brought up.
And I'm glad you asked that question because the success formula, 80% of the weight, at least 80%, is in change management, which is cultural management, right? You really need to transform that because especially at the beginning of your journey, the output is not going to be stellar. In fact, it could be riddled with problems. And the first thing the users would say, the biggest enemy of Gen AI is inertia, human culture. I wouldn't want to use it. I'm already so adept and skillful in my work, right? I really don't want to get subpar output from Gen AI. And then if you continue that course, nobody's going to use it. So you got to, at the very start, get advocates, get really mature users and understanding users who are here to co-create this thing with us. And the expectations must be managed right. They cannot come in with, tinted glasses. It's not going to be a walk by the park. They must understand that this thing has potential to be incredible, but it can also have many, many gaps. Use it where it can be used. Where there are gaps, give honest feedback. Right? If you succumb to inertia as a user, and the worst thing is not a complaint from the user. The worst thing is just absolute indifference. Then this thing will never take off. More so than any of the technical prompt engineering parts, which I can go into, multi-shot, chain of thought, the agentic AI approach. We can go into a lot of that, but 80% of it really is in change management.
Gianluca, have you seen some within your kind of consulting experience? Have you seen some organizations that have been, but let's try to get really specific, right? Some organizations that have been able better with some departments or better than others on getting to that 80% that Royce is talking about. And what, sorry, maybe to qualify it, what seems to be also some of the regularities of organizations that are able to versus or organizations that are stuck in that inertia?
I think the point that Royce made are very, very valid. And I think that change management is really important, both in terms of how you use the technology, but also how you design the technology, because it's very, very important. And we've done this with many clients. Also to have a specific let's say training of the people that have to design the use case or the agent that at the end of the day will transform the process. So that's really a key element, because otherwise, if you do not do that, you just keep maybe optimizing the same process, and making, instead of 20 tasks, is made of 15 because 5 are automated, but you're not really reinventing the process, okay? So the actual portion of change management, which means also upfront training, is very relevant, because people that design the new processes have to have what we call a prompt mindset, okay, which is a new mindset that allows to leverage this technology for not just, let's say, enhancing an existing process, but also rethinking the process with the power of agents. So I totally subscribe what Royce is saying, both in terms of training upfront who has to design those systems and the behavior of the agent that they will deliver the value, but also in the adoption, because one thing that is really critical in AI, and Gen AI in particular, is trust, okay? People need to trust the technology in order to use it, because if they do not, if they lose trust, then Gen AI and that specific use case that maybe you have implemented is dead. So of course, it's very important when people start to use, and the workforce start to use the technology, to expect, and knowing that you can expect also not perfect results, that chipping into your expertise into the prompting can lead to a better data set and provide better result. And in a day-by-day using of the system, you will reach the maximum productivity and the maximum output. Because otherwise, if there is not this mindset also of trying and improving, the way in which the system works, then, the chain is broken, because at the end of the day, you risk to put in production many use cases which are not used and therefore do not deliver the value.
I'm sorry, I'm going to be a bit of a professor right now. I'm saying,
Yeah.
okay, these are great in general terms. I would like to hear from you guys very specific examples to test a little bit. So give me a real world example. Like the sentence should start, for example.
For example, I mean, a contact center operator, okay, if we want to pick contact center operator, of course, you can create, agents for supporting a contact center operator, for example, for being able to better answer the question while they come in from a telephone call or a chat or whatever, okay? So, many times at the beginning, the operator thinks that he knows the answer best, okay? Because he's always answered that and he knows how to answer, and tends maybe not to use the tool, the Gen AI tool that you put in place for actually improving a better answer, okay? Or providing a better answer. So instead, the training of this operator in using the technology and in changing the way of working from I know best to let's see what the new agent or the AI or Gen AI agent can do is really important, because otherwise you create an AI use case which is not being used, and therefore the performance of your contact center won't improve. You have made an investment and you won't get any productivity gain. So it's really, as hands-on as that, you really need to train the people. People need to be aware of what is there and needs to be aware of how to use it. Digging information using prompt is not digging information as on Google, where you try to put the least information to get the quicker response. It's really diving, and going to get the information question after question. So it's really a different way of working. It's really a different mindset. I don't know, Loic, if there was a
That's great. That's great.
specific.
That's specific. Royce, can you to build on Gianluca's point? Have you guys done approaches? I'm going to call this A/B testing, for lack of a better analogy. But putting an agent by themselves, putting an agent enhanced by AI, and then being able to show the agent, look how different the questions are to change those mindsets. Have you done some of these aspects around this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the whole thing about change management. Now, change management is like, I can't say that, look, please take in good faith what I say, right? So you need to derive proof points. And the proof points are exactly what will fuel the change management. What we do is advisors who actually use the Gen AI, they come to us with success stories, right? For instance, right now this client is a Middle Easterner, and he doesn't want to invest in Russian names. He only wants to do big American names, right? And he is open to buy derivatives from us. Then we will come to him with structures. You have investment consultants, you have the relationship manager coming up with a plethora of things that they normally do in their investment proposal, and they go to meet the client, and the client could throw it out the door. And there are several cases where Gen AI has picked up structures, right, investment propositions that neither the 15-year investment consultant or the 20-year relationship manager, 20 years and 20 years of experience, have put on the table for the client. And they come back and say, wow, how did we miss this? How did the machine pick this up? And that's never before possible just using normal machine learning, right? Machine learning can be solving things in multi-dimensional arenas, right? But it's kind of linear. Linear in the sense that if you feed those features, that's about it. Obviously, the solution is not linear, it's multi-dimensional. But with Gen AI, it can actually do the reasoning. It can discover new patterns on the fly. It learns, it self-learns. In fact, it's the epitome of machine learning, right? It can take the tacit things that's within language, which you were not able to codify, right, by normal machine learning in the past, and give insights that were never there before. So you've collectively got 35 years of experience between the investment consultant and relationship manager, but they still missed it, right? So look, I said that this is nascent. This is still not optimized. It could get better. But even now, we are seeing pretty good examples. And these are the proof points where you take around to the next advisor and said, that, hello, why do you miss that? Why are you leaving money on the table just because you're not using it? Because of inertia? Or because you didn't care enough to understand? Or because you didn't care enough to explore? You didn't want to invest in teaching this stuff. So there are many such examples. I mean, that's just wealth management. And you can apply in sales and marketing, right? In the marketing arena, you can infuse behavioral science into your Gen AI. The possibilities are just infinite, right? And there are many proof points, even in these early days. So when I say change management, I'm not philosophizing, and neither am I getting them into a religion. Well, it's a religion of science, if you will. But there are proof points, right? And then we calibrate in time and out of time, which is in time meaning that I've got, say, the Greater Asia relationship manager, and then I've got the ASEAN relationship manager. Some who use or don't use in time at the same time. Markets are almost similar. Why did they outperform? Then even for you yourself as a user, last quarter you didn't do as well. This quarter you book a few more deals. Why? I attribute it to the machine.
Yeah, to be able to kind of this.
So it's the calibration is essential. The proof points are essential, and then that's how we approach it. But
Great.
look, it's a tedious journey. So I really don't want anybody to harbor any illusion. Setting up the use case requires people who really understand the business. it cannot be technology driven nor data science driven. It has to be business driven, right? And if the business user, I as a business user, as a business owner, if I don't understand this stuff and don't know how to orchestrate it, and I leave it to tech and science, it won't fly.
Yeah, I think Gianluca and I were having a conversation earlier saying, technology is also often trying to find a business problem to solve. Business problems are trying to find a technology to solve it, and then that matching function is not very good. And so there's something that needs to be done around that discovery process. But you mentioned this aspect about behavioral science, and I was chatting with Melinda Cotelauele, who is the CEO of Newton Russell. And one of the things he was saying is that through this kind of AI approach to obligation traceability, we can actually decrease the amount of effort needed for compliance by 80% while increasing the effectiveness by 80%. But the problem is that regulators often look at the input into compliance rather than the output, right? If you start looking at the regulation and compliance, what do you think are key regulatory and compliance considerations that banks must start navigating when deploying these kind of AI-powered services?
The prime use cases would be in the area of KYC and customer onboarding. Yes, and very rightly so. You have to be compliant with the regulations and the rules that are set, right? But even before that, the success of using Gen AI, again, is predicated on whether you can standardize and put across to the regulators that this is how my position statements and this is how I interpret the regulations. And proven because whether it's the loss rates or the non-compliance incidents in the past was slow because I followed this approach. Once you have that standardized set of input, right, from the compliance department, then you can start doing your Gen AI, which is that your input has to be standardized. Like if I do my source of wealth corroboration, if I do my name screening before I onboard somebody, right, we must set the expectations very, very clearly because you're dealing with a machine who can deal with, unstructured stuff. But the input and the requirements into your prompt must be clear as day. Right? Only then are you able to output the things that will stand all the scrutiny, whether it's internal compliance or it's with the regulators. And that's where it's really, if you can solve for compliance and KYC, it's hugely beneficial, right? To growing the business, to decrease employee toil.
Gianluca, any comments on this, on where you see some of the aspects of regulation and regulatory and compliance evolving over the next future?
Yeah, I think indeed, and I think that's a very, very important topic. Then, regulation is not homogeneous across the globe. I'm in Europe, so the regulation might be different somewhere else. Certainly in Europe, there has been recently, about 1 year back, I think, the AI Act, which really has provided a framework within which you need to move, because AI and Gen AI are great, of course, but they also need to be strictly governed, and they require a significant governance in order to make sure that the systems and the AI algorithm, the Gen AI algorithm you have, are mapped and classified. And that's an important element, because you need to know where you have AI and where in the process, which are typically process which requires, compliance in order to be executed, where AI kicks in. So it's very important, in this respect, to have a robust governance model, okay, a framework which minimize the risk brought by AI. So, for example, biases or hallucination, for example, from the LLM models. So all the guardrailing needs to be put in place in order to make sure that what is a great technology also provides, an output that is acceptable both for the customer and internal. So it's also very important to create quantitative marks and metrics to ensure that the accuracy of the response is valid up to a level in order to make sure that that output can, for example, be provided to a customer to make sure that the output is at least as good as 90%, for example, 100%, 99%, whichever is the mark. So taking the regulation, it's very, very important. It's very important to govern everything that has got to do with AI, because again, if the AI provides wrong output or misleading output, then trust in the AI is gone. And that's really one of the, I believe, bigger pitfalls that we might face in the future.
When you talk about so maybe let me bounce on that point about robust governance model, Gianluca and Royce. If you start looking at how to govern and scale AI use safely and responsively, do you have examples within DBS where you say we've had this governance model, it seems to be working well? And maybe, one thing that could be really interesting is what are areas in which you say, we tried governance and we still haven't gotten it right. What are some of the learning points from where you are still kind of trying to discover how to actually get to that safety and responsibility, but at scale rather than from a POC point of view?
So there's a technical answer, and then there's the a more human intensive one. The technical answer would be then we use AI to actually check on AI. So you almost run again a generative adversarial network where one set of AI checks on the other set's output to make sure that everything the outputs is within range, within guardrails. That's the scaling part of it. Then for the major use cases, we have responsible AI use AI governance committees, where every use case at the conceptualization stage, even before it goes to tech life production, would have to go through the council. But for the major ones, right? And we are focusing only on a few major ones right now. So it's at this point in time, it's still very manageable. And then we look at exactly what the purpose of this thing is, the output. Have we used it according to some of the regulatory prescription? So that's how I run it, through a combination of AI checking on AI and a combination of having a responsible AI committee.
In Singapore, you have a very hands-on and open-minded regulator. Singapore has set up regulatory sandboxes for financial innovation. Do you have has the Singapore government, has the Singapore Monetary Authority or regulatory authority maintained this kind of sandbox mechanism around AI and or prompt engineering? And have you kind of do you have lessons maybe to kind of give to other banks to say, hey, this is how you should approach your regulator? Also trying to train the regulator a bit better on this discovery system around governance.
So there are two parts to this, right? AI is very mature. So MAS would have its, say, for instance, this FEAT principle, like section 8.22 or so 8.23. So those are principles that we already have industrialized into a package as part of our CI/CD. So so it's part of the artifact. And before this thing is deployed, it will go through that self-check, right? We also have the pure framework, right, to make sure that it's purposeful, it's respectful, it's unsurprising, and it's ethical, which largely, again, are in line with the MS's provisions, right? So that part is almost hard-coded in, or as a stipulated process. Now, GenAI space, again, which is precisely why we have human in the loop. This thing obviously is not licensed, right? Like our advisors are licensed, which is why for this license activities, you always have a human in the loop, and that's how we deal with it. Nothing that we are doing now is so experimental that we are at the fringe of regulations that we have to sandbox this thing as yet. But of course, the MAS being one of the most enlightened regulators and supervisors in the world would avail all these sandboxes. And it's not only recently. I mean, for a long time they have sandboxes always.
Yeah, absolutely. Gianluca, based on your global involvement, do you see areas, again, same questions, where you see regulatory authorities really dialoguing with financial institutions to allow this innovation to emerge whilst developing an appropriate governance and compliance mechanism?
Sorry, can you just rephrase sorry, can you just repeat the question? I didn't get it.
Yeah, the question is saying, just like Royce was saying, the Monetary Authority of Singapore is quite enlightened and open-minded and really trying to find the right regulation rather than the old regulation. What would be the right way to regulate the industry as we have new technologies? Do you have examples internationally where you've seen regulators really kind of working hand in hand with banks in a partnership point of view to allow emergence of such innovations, and therefore some of the learning points for organizations to approach regulators to develop those types of partnerships?
Yeah, sure. Well, I can talk for specifically for Europe in my case, of course, but I think that there's an imprint, okay, where there's the AI Act from Europe that basically regulates how AI, and not only for banks, should be, of course, used. Then I think there's at the moment different level of adoption in different banks and different countries, because there is not just the overall regulation, but also the internal compliance of banks act differently on the innovation. Some of the banks are more open to innovation. For example, one of my clients, as of today, there have been more than 150 use cases that have been developed with a lot of support from the internal compliance, which are very open-minded. Other clients are still trying to resolve also internally how and what is the risk in order to scale AI. So I think this is still a bit of an open topic and is not something that is yet completely addressed in terms of how do I match all the compliance regulatory requests, and it depends very much on the interpretation of the rules by the internal compliance of the bank. I think that Europe, in that respect, probably has tried to create a framework which is very broad, but at the same time, it requires also a lot of internal compliance and may sometimes a bit slow down the innovation, let's put it that way, but not because of Europe, simply because of the regulation are very, very strict.
Just to remind the audience, we have 5 minutes left, and I've been trying to pick on some of the questions and insert them within my questions. But please, if you still have some questions, please don't hesitate to type it into the Q&A box or upvote some of the questions that you feel that we haven't answered yet. So we talked a little bit about, creating real value in banking, and how AI can do there beyond the hype. And we're getting a specific examples on both customer facing, streamlining some of the operations and some of the regulatory and compliance. I think both of you have made the case quite strongly on saying, it's about business Right? So prompt engineering unlocking business grade AI performance, right? So on consistency and reliability, on alignment with business goals, on contextual awareness. I love the point that you were making, Royce, about wealth management. You really have to get the context right. It's not just a a broad search of data, and on the governance aspect. And I think the point that you were making also on how to govern and scale this safely and responsibly, these governance model, there's some part which is systematic and programmatic, but there's a lot of the part which is about changing that, but really making sure that people understand the purpose of the regulation, of the compliance of the regulation, rather than the tick the box aspect, right? So I think that cultural aspect, that change management, that cultural aspect is really, really important. Any last comments that you guys would like to give before we close the session? Royce, Gianluca.
I think get your CEO's support fully behind. It's a monumental thing. So unless you have alignment right at the top, it's not easy to push this through. Right? You must start all the way from the top.
No, I totally subscribe. Oh, sorry, Royce. Go ahead.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
No,
Go ahead.
I totally subscribe what you're saying, and it's probably even the CEO that requires sometimes, or most of the time, really to support a broad AI adoption. It's something that has got a technology portion to that, because you need to have the workbench for supporting and scaling. Because what also I see is that many banks have done some pilots or POC of things very rapidly, but then without having an architecture and a workbench, a set of tools which allow the scaling, then you are unable, to move forward, because at the point you are stuck, you're not able to move forward and scale. And that's one technical aspect. But in general, AI and Gen AI is a huge play, is a huge change management and change in processes that really requires buy-in from the top management, and what I would say most of the time from the CEO directly, because otherwise it risks to remain just a pilot, which would be really a great shame, because you're just destroying value, destroying potential future value.
Thank you. On behalf of INSEAD and on behalf of our audience, I really want to thank you, Royce and Gianluca, for your time and for your insights. I think the 3 points that I really get out of this is, it's not a technology issue. It's a change management issue, right? So one of the aspects is, we have to stop looking for that silver bullet, that billion-dollar kind of product. And we have to start exploring a bit more, right? So variance is good in this setting, because it's about learning, and I think what you guys were really saying, it's about that capacity of an organization to get that culture, to get that digital mindset, as my colleague
Mindset, yes.
Yeah, that my colleague Jürgen Jörg Niesing put it into the Q&A. And that indeed some of the ROI is around organizational capacity, just not ROI on a project, but really from a balance sheet point of view. And then I think the third point that you guys made is it's got to be really business led. It's got to be business led and technology enabled, right? Don't start with the hammer, because if you start with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So experiment, learn, and stay on business focus. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time. I wish everybody a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.